Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rick Ackerman, editor of the newsletter Rick's Picks, his website rickackerman.com. Welcome back to the show, Rick.
Thank you much for inviting me on, Jim. Always a pleasure.
Rick, the equity markets seem to be in a unique place. Some people have said we're kind of like the way we were March before all of the COVID shutdowns. Are we teetering for a plunge, or are we getting ready to ramp off the end of the runway and climb higher?
Well, when we were plunging pretty good a month ago, Jim, you would swear that the market was finally acting rationally, since there were about 100 good reasons why we should be in a bear market. And the market fell and fell and fell. And of course I was saying, well, this is it. And my pronouncements in my newsletter were more and more cocksure as to, well, this is it. And I kind of took for granted that the bear had finally arrived. But when you get these, let's call it a bear rally, but it's really not. When you get these rallies, you tend to forget when the market was coming down. It just seems so right. So I think we're going to new highs. It starts as a kind of phony looking short squeeze bounce, but it just picks up momentum as you go along. And I think it's already got enough to be stargazing right now, dreaming about new highs, or let's say plotting them.
Certain sectors tend to do better than others. Do you see a certain sector powering this climb higher, or is it going to be all ships will rise when the tide goes up?
Yeah, I favor the everything bubble theory. We are in an everything bubble, and the tide lifts everything. You can bet that if whatever stock you hold isn't getting lifted, you definitely should get rid of it. But yeah, everything's going to go up. Led by Bitcoin. You know, I use Apple myself as a bellwether, but the more I look at Bitcoin, the more I think it better reflects, it best reflects all the nuttiness that's in this market.
And what do you think is going to happen with Bitcoin?
Well, ultimately, because it's worthless, and I've had conversations with a lot of people who know a lot, think they know a lot about Bitcoin, but I would say not a single one of them, not even one, with his very best reasoning, has explained to me why Bitcoin should be worth anything. As far as I can tell, it's only the only thing intrinsically lovable about Bitcoin is that the mintage was limited. We were limited to Satoshi's 21 million quantity, and of course they get harder to produce as you get closer to that threshold. But to me, scarcity is not enough to make something money. So I think Bitcoin. I'm also very bullish in my forecast, and I recently raised my minimum target from $55,000 to I believe it's 64 and change, or maybe it was 66,000. But yeah, I'm looking higher right now.
So they really are the modern equivalent of tulips.
No, I think tulips really had value because they smelled nice and they looked lovely. You could actually plant them and even mistakenly slice one thinking it was a shallot or something, as I think it was described in Extraordinary Popular Delusions. So I think tulips are really intrinsically much better than Bitcoin.
So, of course, we know what happened to tulips after that mania was over, and a lot of people lost fortunes. Are people going to lose fortunes on Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, or is this a thing that's just going to stick around because millennials and younger believe in stuff they can do on their phone and they don't understand precious metals at all?
I have trouble believing they don't understand precious metals. Maybe they don't understand them in the way that you would if you went to a mining site and saw just how energy intensive the process of getting gold and silver from the ground is. It really takes a lot of machinery, a lot of energy. So it's the real deal. And I guess it's somewhat fanciful to think of Bitcoin miners as miners, because they're really just sort of plugging in their processors and running machines, and it's hardly what I would call mining. So I'm not sure what the young people understand. Some of them had the good sense to get out of some of their Bitcoin that they've held since it was valued at whatever it was, $1.27. And but it's kind of a sliding. There's a spectrum, I guess, of young people in Bitcoin, and some of them probably bought more as it rose. So in the end, though, it's going to come down in a way that most of the rats will get trapped on a ship.
What's your opinion of the Robinhooders and Robinhood itself, where Robinhood is now offering college students $15 if they decide to trade on their platform? Isn't that a lot like the gambling websites where they'll give you money up front to gamble with to see if that can get you hooked?
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, what's funny is all that stuff occurs in full view of the quote-unquote regulators. You know, they're so busy putting Martha Stewart in jail that they've let an entire system run amok. And that's definitely running amok when a broker can go out there and kind of and dangle candy in front of the little ones.
Should the regulators be taking a look at Robinhood?
Well, yeah, and they do, or at least they pretend to, but not much has changed. You know, the regulators, if you take them back, let's say 40 years, when you introduced some products that very clearly circumvented blue sky laws, you had tradable products that were essentially derivatives of other products, and you got kind of a daisy chain there till the thing that you're actually trading could be described as it existed only, well, not it wasn't existential, it was virtual, and it never got regulated. I had a friend on the Pacific Stock Exchange, and I seem to recall he was going to sue somebody to rein in all this trading of things like options on S&P futures and all these index products that were starting to develop then. And of course, we didn't even have listed put options until I think it was probably around the late 70s. Each of the exchanges was only listing at that time five stocks with puts, but before then you had to create them synthetically. But the game just keeps growing, and the regulators, I guess, see themselves as being in charge of this expanding fiefdom. So nothing is more satisfying for someone who regulates something than to have that thing that gets regulated keep growing and growing and growing. And that's I think the root of the problem.
We'll have more with Rick Ackerman right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rick Ackerman. Rick, what do you see for energy? Natural gas going kind of crazy right now.
Yeah, it really is. I keep hearing that the winter prospects of a long, cold winter in Europe are really what kind of pushing things, and it's a little bit like rainfall. There's plenty on planet Earth. It just doesn't seem to fall in the right places. So the upward spiral in natural gas prices is, I guess, a function of the fear of this cold winter with no fuel. And it's anomalous, but I don't think I can tell you where exactly it's going to end.
Well, Russia said they'd increase the flow of their natural gas. Russia's not exactly the most reliable supplier. Ask Ukraine about that.
Well, the U.S. used to worry about that. I guess they used to tell the rest of the world, hey, Europe in particular, do you really want to be dependent on Russian energy supplies? But I don't know. When you look at the big picture, is Russia any less trustworthy than the U.S. to fulfill its market obligations? I mean, it's not. I think the suppliers are all fungible in terms of how ethically they conduct business.
Well, President Biden, the first thing he did was cancel the XL pipeline, taking Alberta petroleum products down to Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. And now he's urging OPEC and Russia to turn on the taps. Who does he support, Canada or Russia?
I'm not sure he knows who he's supporting to begin with. I mean, I see, it's funny. You see the New York Times and a couple other newspapers treat Biden as a serious, sentient individual in their news. They'll talk about, Biden's fiscal policy or Biden's policy for masking or this or that, but he's not capable of policy anything. I mean, I don't know where the policy's coming. It's probably generating itself at this point, but so I'm not quite sure what to think of, quote unquote, Biden's policy on this or that.
Well, the Canada-U.S. border, Americans are allowed into Canada, but Canadians still aren't allowed into the States. And I don't see what the economic sense of that is.
Yeah, I don't either. That's terrible. I'm glad I'm not traveling back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. But, well, thanks for letting me know.
Now, the product shortages, continue, and I've been told they could last another year or two. What are you hearing?
I don't care what I hear. I really think they're going to last the rest of our lifetime, because essentially you've caused the whole world in terms of how it processed inventory, how it dealt with inventory. The whole world was on just-in-time inventory. Everything was you might say that it was running like a Swiss watch, that efficiently. So what we've had with the pandemic and certain bottlenecks in supply, it's equivalent of taking a ball-peen hammer and whacking the Swiss watch. It's never going to be the same, really. The movement was just too delicate. There are just too many parts. And because small pieces can impact the larger functionality, it's never coming back. Really, we're gonna have shortages of something or other for the rest of our lives, and I think it'll be alleviated to some extent by the third Great Depression that's on its way. There'll be less consumer demand for a whole bunch of things, and these insane premiums that you have to pay when you order a new automobile will decrease somewhat. But I think that the supply screw-ups, the supply chain screw-ups are going to be with us forever.
Also, we have China having major military supplies right off the Taiwan coast. Do you think China will invade Taiwan if China's economy gets worse and they want to divert the public's attention away from it?
I don't think they would be that stupid, really. They've already won. I mean, they can see that the U.S., even though China has to deal with its own speculative bubble, the one in the U.S. is worse. China at least has the ability to direct and incentivize savings when the time comes for another rebuilding process. So I think even with Evergrande, where China evidently decided to let the chips fall where they may, there was a calculation there that yes, it could bring the whole bloody system down, but that China would be able to emerge from the collapse in better shape than the U.S. It reminds me a little bit of Dr. Strangelove, where they're doing the calculation, and George C. Scott, is a General Ripper character, is talking about, well, if in a first strike or in a retaliatory strike, if the U.S. strikes first and Russia fired back, he says, we'd only lose, whatever it was, 60 million tops. So I think the Chinese have already made that calculation, and they're willing to let it happen.
Chairman Mao had made that calculation as well when he was trying to urge Khrushchev to start World War III. And Khrushchev says, you'll lose hundreds of millions of people. And he says, yeah, so it's 100 million in a population of 1 billion. We still win. And Khrushchev had been in Stalingrad and saw 2 million people die in front of his own eyes. He knew it's not pretty.
Yeah, the Russians have definitely experienced death close up. Their war losses have been horrific in the same way that certain Civil War battles were horrific. U.S., we were kind of detached. The war was happening somewhere, across the ocean. But Russia and even the rural population has been significantly involved in all the wars that have occurred there.
So perhaps now that generation has pretty well died out. Again, we tend to have big wars once the previous generation who experienced a big war has pretty well died out.
Well, we haven't had a big war in a while, fortunately, and I think that's one instance where the lack of war for so long is going to mean that when a war eventually comes, it'll be worse. I'm not sure that's the case, but we could. The most pessimistic pen pal that I have, he describes himself as a Nostradamian, and he sees actually two wars, world wars, between now and 2035, and also famine and disease and an earthquake which relocates America's west coast to somewhere like Arizona. So he's what I call he's a real pessimist. But the two wars are part of the scenario, and I think the first of them originates with a conflagration in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, the Middle East has been fighting it out for the last 10,000 years. Why stop now?
That's true. It is a time-honored tradition there to be killing one's neighbor. And, of course, we've got killing power on an order that we've never experienced, or at least not since Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
Rick, I'm sorry to end it on such a bleak note. Is there something out there that we should be happy and optimistic about?
Well, I've got a great recipe if you want a good if you serve up carrots and celery and things, if you want a good dip, if you take just tahini paste and you add straight lemon juice to it, it turns to something like brick. So you have to keep adding water to make it drizzle the way you like. And if you add garlic, salt, and pepper to the mix and cut in some finely minced parsley, it's a terrific dip. So that's about the best thing I can leave you with right now.
And we keep hearing how good tahini is for you anyway.
It is good. I mean, it's all organic, I guess. And there are a lot of things that you can do with it. I like cooking Middle Eastern. I just wish I had more time for that.
Rick, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for inviting me on, Jim. It is indeed a pleasure.
My guest has been Rick Ackerman, editor of the newsletter Rick's Picks, his website rickackerman.com. If you have any questions for Rick or any of our other guests, we'll ask that question for you if you send it to info@howestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.